We have the 4 questions, right? And but for anyone who's done an Emunah, they will understand that we have the 2 questions. And the way that works is in the first 4 months comes the first question, then there's quiet period in the second 4 months, and then the third 4 months comes the second question. So the first question is, have you started working on it yet? So I'm going to answer both of these questions tonight. So the answer to that question is easy. The answer is yes. And the reason the answer is yes is because I started working on it before Rabbi Gellman chose me to do this. Hopefully. I actually wanted to do this. And Rabbi Gellman, if you're watching this on video someday, I'm sure you knew that, although we never discussed it. And somehow I'm here doing this now, and it's kind of unbelievable and amazing. But yeah, I had started working on it. Then the second question, are you ready? And I was pretty consistent. There are many of you that asked me this question. I was pretty consistent in saying, I'll answer that on the night. The answer to that question is basically no. But it needs a little explanation. The honor's too great. I'm all too aware of my shortcomings. And, you know, it's a lot. And on top of that, I'm aiming very high. I have very high aspirations for this opportunity. And if I can achieve, 10% of what I would like to achieve, that would be great. But it's very hard to be ready with high aspirations. And then on top of all that, there's a more basic problem, which is what I want. I know what I want to say tonight, but what I want to say can't be said in words. So how do you get ready to say something that can't be said? And it's funny because Sunday morning, Rabbi Gellman said exactly what I had written into my notes a couple of days before, which are the things that are worth talking about can't be talked about. Everything that's worth talking about can't be talked about. So that's one of the challenges that I have tonight. And so I'll ask you to, they say read between the lines, listen between the words. And it may help for me, it may help to communicate what I want to communicate. Now, so the answer to that second question is no, I'm not ready. But it's not for the lack of trying. And I think you could say that I've been preparing for this my whole life. So, and I have a plan. So let me tell you what the plan is. Okay, first of all, I know what I want to do. I want to share with you what Judaism means to me. That's what I want to do. Simple, clear, objective. Good start. Not easy for many reasons, but clear objective. Okay, now, that's what I want to do. I don't want to tell you the story of my life. I have to say a few words about the story of my life because otherwise I won't be able to even begin to explain what Judaism means to me. But I'm going to try to keep the story of my life part fairly short and spend more time talking about things that I think are really important. So I have a plan. I have an organizing principle for the talk. I have some visual aids too. So this is the organizing principle. It's one of the shorter Hebrew words. Everybody know what this word is? Shem, means name. Right. So I'm going to organize the talk, the main part of the talk, around this word. I'm going to deconstruct it, and then I'm going to talk about it a little bit. As a prelude to that, I'll tell you some things about the arc of my life, as briefly as I can, because I don't want to dwell on that. And then the end of it will be to give very brief little drash on commentary on the Torah portion for the week, which I looked up a long time ago and challenged me, really, how am I going to talk about that? But then it hit me. So I have a few words to say about the Torah portion. So that's the plan. A little bit about my life, that, and a little on the Torah portion, and then a little surprise at the end, something interesting. Further honoring Dr. Joseph Grafeo. Okay, so I grew up in a little town, suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. Everybody knows St. Louis, Middle West, near the Mississippi. And there's a little suburb near suburb of St. Louis called University City. And when I grew up there, let's say, 1952 to 64, it was about 90% Jewish population. And the schools were about 95% Jewish population. And, that's just what happened to me. I mean, what can I say? I know people have had vastly different experiences, but I think it was even more intensely Jewish than Long Island. And it was, in retrospect, it's just fascinating that I had that kind of a growing up. And I took to Judaism very early. Not so much because my parents were that into it. They strongly identified as Jews, but they weren't what you would think of as religious. But like many parents, they joined a temple for the kids, and it was a classical Reform temple, Sher Emeth, as the rabbi mentioned, and they had a great program there. And I really went through the whole Megillah, end to end. I took to it. I liked it. It meant something to me. And so with all the lives that I was leading, I look back sometimes, how could I have been so many different people in so many different places? My academic life, my musical life, my counterculture life, my romantic life, all those things that were going on, but at the same time, my Jewish life had a very, very central role. And, I was in the religious school. I was bar mitzvahed, of course. I was confirmed. Beyond confirmation, there was religious high school, so I continued that. I was very active in the youth group, National Federation of Temple Youth. I was a leader in NIFTY. I went to the NIFTY summer camps, as the rabbi mentioned. And it meant a lot to me. And, if I tried to describe what it meant, probably the key word is community. But more than community, acceptance, actual caring, and something even more than that, which I try to describe, and I think this is really one of the key Jewish knacks. I mean, Jews have knacks for certain things, and what comes to mind? I mean, Jews are very, tend to run very intelligent, more Nobel Prizes, music, arts, et cetera, et cetera. But Jews have a knack for something else, I think, that's even more basic and more important. And that knack is what I would describe as for being for each other. Jews have this knack for being for each other. And that's, you know, we live in a very competitive, sometimes described dog-eat-dog world. And so that environment that can be created among people who are for each other is something very extraordinary. And I knew it. I knew that in the temple. I knew that in those situations, that there were people who were for me, and I felt accepted and nurtured in a deep way, in a way that I never felt in any other of the many situations of my life, many contexts. So the bond was strong from my whole life. And as the rabbi said, I did consider becoming a rabbi. I admire the rabbis very much. I don't see how I could have grown up without the role models and the experiences of the Jewish adults that I had a chance to be with when I was young. It was extraordinary. It was really the thing that drew me, helped me to grow up, to come out of that childness and into realizing that I could be an adult, that I could be a part of the adult world. An amazing thing. I also want to mention one other thing, which is a strong connection with Israel, which started when I was in high school. My family was the host family in the first year of the Eisendrath International Exchange Program, the Reform Movement program, which at that time not only brought Reform kids to Israel, but brought Israeli kids to the United States. And our guest for a semester of high school was the man who is now Rabbi Dr. Gil Nativ, and who is a lifelong friend. So I had that connection to Israel. And many years later, and I, just sort of getting out of time like the Torah, right? No before, no after. Many years later, in the 80s and 90s, I worked for a company named Converse Technology that had its roots in Israel. And I went to Israel perhaps 50 times in those 12 and a half years, probably spent end to end at least a year total in Israel, and obviously made many strong bonds of friendship with Israelis. And Converse was one of the great Israeli success stories. I joined it when it was a zero revenue company. When I left it, it was $1 billion global dominator in its field and a NASDAQ 100 index company. And it definitely, although it was a US company, definitely had its strongest presence in Israel, employed many hundreds of people, brought tremendous prosperity and technology clout into Israel. So I feel that I had a part of that too. And, I'm saying that because I'm going to have some comments later about what is the promised land. And, I have my views on that, which I'll share, but I don't, my connection with Israel is not theoretical. It's very tangible. It's very specific and practical. So I thought I might want to be a rabbi. I went to college, I went to Harvard, and I got secularized. I think that happens to a lot of kids. It was like, well, there's good people everywhere coming from lots of backgrounds, and many people want to make the world a better place, do tikkun olam, and I don't really have to go into the specific Jewish, context to have that kind of a life. So I got kind of secularized. Then I graduated, and I didn't have a clear plan for graduate school. So then I had to get into the whole thing of making a living. It was like I woke up one day and I guess I have to, what do you call it? Job? a thought that had literally never crossed my mind in my entire life. And so I got involved in making a living, and making a living absorbed me. You know, it wasn't difficult. It was challenging, but I was doing very well. I had a lot of things going. By the time I was 27, I had a good job, very good job, very promising, working with great people that I really enjoyed working with. I was living with a wonderful woman, and back in those days, living with someone was really serious. You know, I mean, we were on a marriage track for sure, no doubt about it. And everything was nice, but at the same time, I knew that there was something missing. So at the age of 27, actually in May of 1973, something happened, and I could describe this in one way by saying that I sold the family cow for 4 magic beans. Right? So, at any rate, everyone knows the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. Very poor family. Mother gives Jack, the young man, the cow to take to the market and sell it. On the way to the market, he meets some guy, and he offers him these 4 magic beans. Some stories it's 5, some it's not specified, but 4 is important in this telling of the story. So, and he thinks it's great, and he gets the 4 magic beans, and he goes home and tells his mother, and his mother was not pleased. Remember, she wasn't happy about it at all. Well, the same thing happened to me. This was not a happy day for Mr. and Mrs. Kowarsky at all. They were very concerned that their son was, you know, basically throwing away his life, giving up. He had everything going for him, and he was giving up so much for what appeared to them to be nothing. And that's what it looked like from the outside. Okay? 4 magic beans. But it looked different for me. So let me just ask a question. Could it be that there is something, one thing that's more important than everything else? Could it be that there's one thing that's just more important than everything else? Everything else, all the things that we are so preoccupied with, all the things that we spend so much time with. And when I think about that, you know, I have to say, that word "one" rings a bell, you know. Definitely rings a bell. And that's at least what it was for me. What were the 4 magic beans? Well, they were 4 ways of connecting with something. It's something that's actually inside of me and inside of every person. And I realized when I encountered this experience that this was, for me, that one thing that was more important than everything else. And that became the priority and has been the priority for me in my life, actually, since that time. I learned something. And what I learned was that what I'm looking for is inside of me. And I have to explain that a little bit because I don't mean it the way you probably think I mean it. I don't mean it like, oh, that's a beautiful idea, or even, oh, that's really true, something like that. And I don't mean it like it's some vague, somewhere inside of me, not like that. I mean it as I was saying to Jaya the other day. If I say to Jaya, do you know where my wallet is? And she says, yes, your wallet's in the great room, on the coffee table, in that little Chinese bowl in the middle of the coffee table. Okay? What you're looking for is in the great room, on the coffee table, in the little Chinese bowl. Okay, that's the way I mean it. I mean it very specifically. I learned that what I'm looking for is inside of me, and I learned how to connect with it. So I really dedicated myself to that. Apparently, to the view of everyone else, abandoning so much that I had going for me. But for me, that was that one thing that is more important than everything else. So yes, and by the way, that one thing being inside, I mean, it doesn't have to be inside. I mean, it could be in this bottle, it could be in this book, it could be in this rock, but it's sort of convenient that it's inside, because if what I'm looking for is inside of me, and if what you're looking for is inside of you, we don't have to fight. Which, that's nice. That's nice. So I did. I dedicated myself. I lived in an ashram environment for 10 years, which basically means a place where you can focus on honing your ability to tune in to that inner experience. And where that is the number one priority for everything. And that's what I did. And then, the ashram period kind of evolved into a new, beautiful career for me in technology. And it was a very successful career. And I had the whole Israel experience, and I started another company, and we had an incredible experience. And, I did a lot of things. But it's not like that was my main priority. It never was. I can say that sincerely. My main priority was this inner experience. So what am I doing here at all? I mean, that's a good question. And actually, it wasn't my idea. It was Jaya's idea. I don't know if you know that. But Jaya was bugging me, oh, let's join the temple. And I resisted it. And I resisted it not because I didn't want to or I thought I wouldn't like it. I was quite sure that I would like it. And I do, and I like it more than I even imagined. And I'll explain that. But I was concerned that it would distract me from, because I had a very full life, both, of course, professionally and many other things, but focusing on this inner experience through the four magic beans. And so I was concerned. And my story then, it's not that, there's a sort of a cliche story of he goes in search and he goes to the other side of the world, and then on the other side of the world he finds out that it's actually in his backyard. It's not quite that story. I mean, I found what I was looking for, but in re-engaging with Judaism, it didn't interfere with my practice. It complemented it. It enriched it. It deepened it. And it brought back to me all of the joys of Judaism that I had recognized when I was a young person. And, you know, Judaism is so vast. It's one of the things I always saw, and it just never stops amazing me. It is so vast. You can learn and learn and learn and learn, and you're still just scratching the surface of it. And I love that. And also, it's renewed my interest in Hebrew. And I'm going to get into that a little bit because I think, you know, now I understand that if you don't look at the Hebrew, you can't really get it. And when you look at the Hebrew, a lot of things open up that, you know, you can't get from these translations. All translation is interpretation. So I'm going to talk a little about that. So what I'm going to talk about is how this one person who had that somewhat unusual experience in his life experiences Judaism today. And I want to frame it and say, it's just me. If you can relate to it, if it can be meaningful to you, that's great. But if not, it's okay, because it's just me. Okay? Because I'm going to say some wild and crazy, controversial things. Okay. Also, I'm not going to talk about the Kabbalah. From what I've said so far, you might, if you're aware of Kabbalah, you might think I'm going to talk about Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, one of the strong Jewish mysticism traditions, something that's enjoying somewhat of a renaissance these days. Because I'm not an expert on it, I haven't studied it much, but more important, we don't need to. For me to try to share how I understand and experience Judaism, you know, this book, this Siddur that we use every Friday night, a few of the prayers that we say every week, it's every day, is more than enough. You don't have to go into Kabbalah and Zohar, you know, mystical symbols and all that kind of stuff. It's all right there, and so that's what I'm going to be referring to. You know, I hope that maybe if you can see a little bit through my eyes, it'll help you see some things that you might not have seen before. So this is the outline. What I'm going to do, I'm going to deconstruct it. We have the two letters, the shin and the mem. So I'm going to talk about some shin words. I'm going to talk about some mem words. Then I'm going to talk about this word. Shin. What's the first word that comes to mind? It begins with shin. In this room, shalom. Well, could be Shabbat too, but what goes with Shabbat? Shalom. So shalom, I mean, clearly an important word to us, but often translated peace. It doesn't just mean peace. It has a sense about wholeness, completion. It's, you know, peace is just one facet of shalom. Okay, but so what is it? And do we ask ourselves, what is peace? This is Mishkan Tefillah, but it has a predecessor called Gates of Prayer, and that has a predecessor called the Union Prayer Book, which is what I grew up with. So some of the things I'll refer to are from the Union Prayer Book. So the prayer that we do every Friday night, Shalom Rav, is translated as follows in the Union Prayer Book. It's a pretty liberal, poetic translation. And the translation is, grant us peace, thy most precious gift. O thou eternal source of peace. Most precious gift. This is really interesting expression. So there's God, and God gives us many things. You could say that God gives us everything that we have, that they're all gifts from God. Right? But one thing is the most precious gift. And what does that tell us? And is that really true? Because it isn't the most precious gift life? Life itself, the most primordial and basic and precious gift that we get from God is life. We could say that. But life without peace, life without that experience is incomplete. So shalom is the thing that makes life complete. And how do we get shalom? There's a wonderful prayer which we do every Friday night. We sang it tonight. It's the end of the kodesh, but it also stands alone. And the prayer is, Oseh shalom bimramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. And now I have to go into one of my big rants about Hebrew and how we translate it. With apologies, because we had some translation. But, okay. Oseh shalom bimramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. How do we translate that? Everyone know? May the source of peace send peace, grant peace to us. We turn these Hebrew words into a prayer of petition, basically. Please give us peace. May, okay? And this may, that's what I want to rant about. We do too much of this may. And by the way, you can turn that around, you know? And it says, may God give us peace. Is actually saying, God may give us peace. This is not very reassuring. Maybe, maybe not. And beyond that, it's just not what the Hebrew says, in my opinion. Okay? Oseh shalom bimramav. The one who establishes peace in the universe, hu ya'aseh shalom. It's clear as day. He will make peace among us. Ya'aseh. It's straight Hebrew, I'm going to say future tense, but it's not exactly future either, because the Hebrew doesn't have a future, the biblical Hebrew. It has complete and incomplete. So the incomplete means it could be future, it could be present. So, hu ya'aseh shalom can mean he will make peace, and it can mean he is making peace. It can be a statement about the present, something that God is doing right now. And I think that by making it a prayer of petition, we miss a lot. Because there's a message there about how peace comes about. It's an important message, and we shouldn't neglect it. You know, how peace comes about is the one who created the universe, who sustains the universe, is also the source of peace within us. And it makes sense because that thing that created the universe, we are part of the universe. And it is within us. And, you know, peace is not made by a peace treaty. It's not made by a peace plan. And human history can testify to that. Peace comes from a higher power, a higher force. Oseh shalom bimramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. So that's one of my rants about translating everything into the subjunctive. Okay, and I think that another very good example of this is the priestly benediction. Okay? Everyone know the priestly benediction. Really one of the oldest things we have, and one of the most beautiful pieces of poetry. So immaculately structured, so lovely, you know. So here it is. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Same tense, Hebrew incomplete. Okay? Translated by us, may the Lord bless you, Barech, and protect you, keep you, Shomer. But we don't have to translate it as a prayer of petition. I mean, imagine the temple, the temple in Jerusalem, when it was a temple. And imagine the Kohanim blessing the people. I mean, it's the same thing. People of Israel, God may bless you and keep you. And maybe not. We don't really know. We'd like it, but that's not it. That's not it. It's an affirmation. It's an affirmation. And I heard about affirmation in this whole New Age philosophy stuff many years later. And I always felt that it was kind of, a lot of it was pretty weird, because the affirmation is you're trying to affirm something that you want that you don't really have. Like, I am rich, everything I have, everything I do turns to gold. I mean, this kind of affirmation, which I really don't subscribe to. But an affirmation of the truth that we need to be reminded of, that's something else. And that's how I read the Hebrew in the benediction. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Adonai is blessing you and protecting you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha. God is shining the light of his face on you and being kind to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. God is, Yisa, it's the verb of action, of creation in a way. God is doing his face onto you. That's what the Hebrew says. It's hard to translate. Yisa Adonai panav. Panav is face. God is yisaing his face on you and giving you peace. It's an affirmation of the highest truth. It's incredibly expressive. And again, what I'm sharing with you is how I experience it, what I see in it. So, just me. Okay. Just picking two. So, Shekhinah. How many people know the word Shekhinah? Really? Is it not a familiar word? Shekhinah is a very common word in rabbinic Judaism. Going back to the Mishnah, I looked this up, 135 CE, one of the rabbis in the Mishnah, pre-Talmud, just Mishnah, said, if two sit together and the words between them are of the Torah, then the Shekhinah is in their midst. Shekhinah, my opinion, the word comes from a Hebrew word that means to inhabit, to settle, to dwell. And the word Shekhinah refers to an experience of the presence, the divine presence. Okay? It's not a philosophy. It's something that happens, and it happens particularly when Jews get together to pray. And later it becomes identified. You know, we sing Lecha Dodi and Boi Kala, Sabbath Bride, you know. And we stand up and we look at the door, but does anyone come in the door? I mean, who is the Sabbath bride? Who is the Sabbath bride? But the Sabbath bride is the Shekhinah. And that's, you know, not a physical presence, but an experiential presence of divine presence, of holiness. And I think, you know, and by the way, Mishkan, Tefillah, the Mishkan, it's the same word, same root. Okay? Now, I know that some of us experience this. I went to the confirmation ceremony, and one of the confirmands wrote something very beautiful, and I'm going to read it to you. She wrote, I go to a Quaker school, and almost every Thursday we gather in the meeting house for meeting for worship, a Quaker practice of silence and reflection. In those meetings, there's a connection so strong between our community and the building itself that makes me feel an especially strong, godly presence that can't be made by any number of people. It's superhuman and ethereal. I feel God in the silent connection of the meeting house. And, you know, I heard that, and there was something very poignant about it for me. I'm delighted. I'm super happy that she has that experience. But I'm a little bit sad that she didn't say that she has that experience here. Because that experience is available here. And I can tell you, I have that experience here all the time. It's part of my love for Judaism and for this place and for the experience of being together with you and worshiping with you. So I think Shekhinah is something we could think more about. Okay, that's the two Shin words. The Mem. I'm crossing languages here. The three M words are music, Musar, and miracles. So briefly on music, Musar, and miracles. Music, I asked Cantor Applebaum to do the Nava Tehillah music at the beginning. I love all kinds of Jewish music. I love the traditional cantorial music. I love the Hasidic nigunim, klezmer, the sort of secular reflection of the Hasidic music. I love the nifty kind of, you know, folk music. I love it. I grew up on it. And I also love Nava Tehillah, which means beautiful praise. And as you mentioned, you talked about it, right? Nava Tehillah came here, and they did a Friday night. I hope you all, some of you had a chance to experience that. There are a few of you that I see here who were at their workshop, which they did on a Wednesday morning or a Thursday morning, a workshop for Jewish educators. And at that workshop, they basically began, it was a long, 3-4 hour workshop, and they began by doing about a 45-minute Kabbalat Shabbat. It wasn't Shabbat, but that was okay. It doesn't have to be a specific day, not to in any way detract from the magic of Shabbat, which is deeply experienced, but they did a Kabbalat Shabbat, And I was documenting it. And so what I've got, instead of talking about it, I just want to read you a couple of quotes of what people said in response to their Kabbalat Shabbat. Okay? These are all Jewish educators, mainly. Okay? Not necessarily rabbis, but Jewish educators of one type or another. Instead of rushing through the words and getting through the service, we all become the service. We learn the music, not just learning, we learn it by joining in, by doing it, by repeating it in such a different way. I think the repetition helps us to feel it, to become one with it. It drew me in a whole vortex of energy and oneness. It was an incredible experience. That was one person. Another person. You know who you are. I've never been one for group things. I've always been more individualistic. But the energy of everyone's participation here made me feel connected to a higher power. We all seemed to rise up to a higher power. Another one. We work very hard, and we are very proud when our children know the prayers. But now I'm wondering, now, after this, what we just went through, now I'm wondering, do they experience something? And I don't think so, because we are very focused on learning the words and learning a particular tune rather than on what is their experience and what is the community's experience. They're learning what to pray, but are they learning how to pray? Are they becoming prayerful people? This taught me that as an educator, I need to do a better job, and I need to do it in a very different way. I was, these comments, I didn't say any of these things. These comments spoke to me and expressed something, pointed at something which is part of the way I experience Judaism. And that's why I asked Cantor Applebaum to begin with some of this Nava Tehillah music. And I hope that you did feel something and have something of an experience. I think that this whole area of the experience is one of the missing things. We have a big debate in Judaism between reform, which says, I'm grossly oversimplifying, but to make the point. Reform says, just live a good life, Tikkun olam, the 613 commandments. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to wear fringes. You don't have to do this every day. Just live a good life. And then, the traditional Jews that say, you have to do every commandment. You have to do all these things. That's what's important. And yet sometimes they're not living up to the kind of ethical standards that we believe that human beings should live up to. So this big debate, and I've seen this debate rage in many people in this temple who maybe grew up in an Orthodox and then chose a Reform, and they talk about the debate that goes on in their family and that kind of thing. And it's like a false duality. There's a whole other thing that we don't pay enough attention to, which is the experience.